We are ready.
All righty. Welcome to Limitless Mindset, episode number 9. We got the law of connection. This is going to be a good one today. And so before we dive in, though, if you are new here, my name is Logan Manzanares. I'm a business owner, a business professional, transformed well over 2,000 people's lives through this little thing we call health and fitness, a real estate investor, a husband, a father, and one of the most grateful people on this planet. And today we got a special episode, the law of connection. This is going to be a real fun one, especially if you have an ego, you have pride, or maybe you have at times had ego and have pride, or have felt selfish. This is a great one. And today with me, I have two awesome dudes who are going to help give a full circle perception on the law of connection. And that's Mr. John Bodnar and Mr. Tim Cruz. And so without further ado, I'll let Tim go ahead and introduce yourself first, and we'll get rocking and rolling after these fellas introduce themselves to you.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Coach Tim here over at BSB Wealthy Body Coaching. If you haven't met me before, I am a self-admitted meathead slash nerd slash person who loves to pick up heavy things and set them down repeatedly. It's what I love to do. But even more than that, I really love helping people break through and manifest their best, strongest, wealthiest, healthiest versions of themselves on a daily basis. That's really what fills my cup. And that's why I'm here today, is to help you guys find another breakthrough.
Awesome. Nice. I love it. All right, John, who are you?
Well, my name is John Bodnar, and I am a coach at BSB Wealthy Body Coaching. And my primary purpose in life is to get people to get them on a path that they can enjoy, see the long-term benefits of the daily little baby steps that they're making, and understand that they are worth it. They are worth the value. They are worth the work, and that the result is worth it as well.
Awesome. I love it. And if you're listening to this or watching this, it's going to be worth it. It's going to be a good one today. So let's go ahead and let's dive in. The law of connection. So what is the law of connection? The law of connection says that our ego creates separation through comparison and competition, and our sacred self recognizes that we are one. We actually cannot hurt another without hurting ourselves. We cannot bless another without blessing ourselves. The shadow that we judge or the greatness we see in others is simply a reflection of aspects of ourselves. And the more we live with unconditional love and acceptance for ourselves, the more we unconditionally love others. And so really what this means is we are all connected, right? We are all one. And so one of my favorite mantras, the one that really sticks with me anytime I'm starting to feel divisive, I'm starting to feel like somebody's coming at me, is that we're all on the same team. And I truly believe this mantra, and something that is one of my core beliefs, is that we're on the same team. We all want the same things. And when I'm able to come from that perspective, I start to realize that this person who's coming at me, they just want to be happy. They want to be right. They want the same things I do, right? And it's not about me, actually. It's about them. And so instead of me getting aggressive with them and coming combative, I practice empathy. And I find a way to see where they're coming from and I put myself in their shoes and at least try to figure out why they're coming at me this way. And so I can emphasize with, I can understand it. And when I'm able to do that, I no longer hold this judgment or this they're against me mentality. I'm like, okay, they believe what they're saying is best and it's right. And you know what? I appreciate you for doing that. And so there's no ill feelings. And that's where I realize the law of connection is just really understanding that we're all on the same team, right? So yeah, John, you want to piggyback on that and what your layman's terms of law of connection is to you?
Well, the layman's term for me is simply that, like you said, we are all on the same team. And that acknowledgement that everybody wants the same thing is extremely powerful. And so to me, what the understanding of this law allows you to do is simply to treat yourself and treat others as well as you possibly can. Because ultimately, if you're treating yourself well and you're treating other people well, that truly is love. And it's hard to say that love isn't something that the world needs more of, or really just needs in general. Some might say that it's all you need, for people specifically. But and having this understanding is yes, I can treat myself well, I can treat others well, and it's worth doing. It brings us together.
Awesome, love that. Tim, what is your definition of law of connection?
I don't think I can say it any better than you have, Logan, or how you did, John. But I will piggyback off of kind of your mantra that you use? Because obviously we're an inherently selfish people, like we all are, right? Our universe tends to only expand in this diameter of the space that we occupy. So the way that I remember, or at least call back to exactly what Logan was talking about, we're all connected, we're all on the same team, we're all going through the same thing, is to think about like, okay, I have a story. I have trials, tribulations, wants, needs, desires. I have pain points, I have baggage, I have guilt. And guess what? Every single person that I come into contact with has their own story. They have their own set of pain, guilt, shame. They have their own wants, their desires. So really, we all have a story. And when someone, like for instance, cuts you off in traffic or honks their horn and flips you off, our knee-jerk reaction is to think like, hey, that was an affront against me. But really, they're going through something themselves. They have a story too. So if you come at it with that lens, it's much easier to feel empathy, like Logan said, instead of anger or resentment or bitterness. It's way easier to react out of love instead of out of selfish desire, which is I want what's mine.
Definitely. And there's a word for exactly that experience, Tim. I believe it's Sonder, Sonder. Like that's such a powerful idea that it does have its own word.
I like it.
Yeah.
And I'll actually piggyback on that too, a little bit of like our knee reactions. This is where the idea, we've thought this before, is where we have a stimulus and we have a response, right? And so this idea of stimulus is like, oh, since someone cuts us off, we might have this immediate response that we want to flip them off, right? We want to honk our horn. But if we can actually expand that distance between stimulus and response, maybe we can make a different decision, right? And ultimately, you actually have three decisions when it comes to that. You can do what most people do is they can honk and they can flip that person off because that's what happened to them, right? You can do nothing, right? Which would be like maybe the next best thing. Or the third thing you can do is you can practice empathy and you can actually try to like understand where this person's coming from and say, hey, like, I totally understand where you're coming from. I get you flip me off and I appreciate that. Thank you. Right. And like, which one of those responses is actually the most powerful?
No, it's empathy,
right?
The most powerful.
So I think that's always important too, is understanding that you like, no matter what response, those are actually only three things you can do. And again, like obviously not like flipping them off and not being angry is great. That the second option is just like not doing anything. But if you can actually get to the next level and start to truly emphasize and understand where people are coming from, that's when you touch a whole nother level of people that you can be friends with, you can influence, that you can be around, because now you're not holding your prior limiting beliefs onto them, right? You're not projecting them. Excuse me. Which we'll talk about later on. So let's talk about this ego thing, right? So the ego is what gets in the way, right? And the reason why I love this is because guys, and especially alpha guys, and I can speak for myself and from knowing these two very well, ego has definitely been a thing in all of our lives for at least a period of time, and even still presently, right? On some level. And so what is ego? Ego is our self-image. It is not our true self, right? So our ego is what camouflages our true self with labels, definitions, evaluations, analysts, masks, images, and judgment. Right? Ego is the cause of separation and isolation. It is by definition self-centered and selfish. It is driven by greed, desire, and fear, and it views life through a win-lose situation, right? And so it's very powerful, ego, right? And I think it gets a bad rap, and it also gets a good rap sometimes. But ultimately, it's your perception of ego that really is whether it's good or bad. And so I'll pick on Tim a little bit just because when he comes in, like he's self-proclaimed meathead, right? Nerd. So these are all things that he basically defines himself. This is ego defining himself, right? And those things aren't inherently bad, actually, right? Like those are actually all positive virtues. But understanding that it is our ego who actually says that we need to be something, that we need to have an identity that creates a lot of actions in what we do. And by having the right identity, in this case, it can say like, okay, because I'm a meathead, because I'm a nerd, like I'm going to go lift weights, I'm going to eat better, I'm going to read books, right? Instead of being the guy who's out partying till 3 a.m. I'm gonna be the guy who actually like falls on meal plan. And so while sometimes this is where like this definition of ego is bad, but I'm actually showing you in a way where ego can actually be good, right? And we actually refer to this more as an identity. And that's why anybody comes into our program, we call them wealthy bodies, because we want to actually give them this ego. We want to give this identity that they are a fit person, that they are a self-proclaimed meathead, that they do follow their plan, that they're willing, they deserve it, right? And so before we start to dive deep on bad ego, I want to say there is actually good ego as well. Okay. But with that being said, Tim, I'll let you go ahead and follow that up a little bit with what your thoughts are on this slide.
I think that first off, I like what you said about making sure that people understand that ego is not inherently bad nor good. But if we think about just like psychology 101, our unconscious brain is kind of divided into three parts. We have our ego, our superego, and our id. And so the ego is generally exactly like what Logan said. It's our identity. It's the rules and what we tolerate, like the things that we are. And that can be very serving for us. In fact, I believe that's probably why the ego developed, was because if you're a man and like, I'm a hunter, I kill animals, I feed my family, like that's very good to have that kind of identity and that kind of standard for yourself when you live in a hunter-gatherer society. So I believe that especially when we're young and we're developing into adults, like having an ego is very good, because it propels us forward into action, to doing things, and not settling and settling for what's less than what we are. With that being said, though, the ego can actually become the main driver of who we are. And that's when we run into like issues. Whenever you hear somebody like, oh, he's an egomaniac, or he's driven by his ego, that's never a positive connotation. And that's generally when you let the ego control your life. But if we see this as more of like a part of the bigger picture of the ego as a part, it's neither good nor bad, it's just part of who we are, then we can have a more holistic view of the ego, and essentially we can control it. And I would argue that as we age and mature, the ego becomes less important, and other aspects of our unconscious become more important.
That's awesome. Well done. John, your thoughts?
I'm going to dive into more of the negative pieces. So ego is the cause of separation and isolation. And I would say it's also the cause of self-sabotage most often. Because if you need to act in a way that you just do not identify with your ego, then you're not going to act in that way. So if your ego is telling you that you're not a fit person, that you don't stick to your plan, that you sit around and eat brownies all day, that's what you're going to do. And you're going to have one heck of a time changing that behavior without first changing that ego. So it's a lot more impactful than simply, oh, he's arrogant, or yeah, he only lives for his ego. It's really more about who you are and what that identity truly is.
Yeah. And where I see this as being a negative, to follow that up, so I had that positive, now let's talk about negative, is when people self-identify with certain groups. Let's talk about Republicans, right? Republican or Democrat, right? As soon as you start to identify with this ego, this identity, all of a sudden now you can only, like, now you pigeonhole yourself into this one way of thinking, and anybody who's on the other side of it, like, you will not respect them. All of a sudden you isolate yourself from them. You don't want to hang out with them. You will not be friends with them just because you identify as a Republican. This person identifies as a Democrat, right? And that's where I see a lot of the ego actually being a bad thing, is that because of that, you'd find yourself a certain way, and then all of a sudden you start to isolate yourself, you start to separate, right? And that's the easiest one. There's lots of different other examples, but it's really driven through like my thing is right and your thing is wrong, which goes back to the win-lose situation, right? It's like winning at all costs. When actuality, our true selves, we are all connected, right? And so, like, whether you're Republican or Democrat, like, if we're all to be sane here, it's like we just all want what's best for our country. Like, we just want to be happy. We want to have rights. We all want to have wealth. We all want to have health. We all want to have happiness. And it doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. We all just want the same thing, right? But because we have these labels of these two things, now we have this conflict, right? There's conflict that, even though like that makes sense, but because you're on this other side, like, I just can't agree with that. I'm sorry. Like, that's the type of mentality we have. And like, it sounds silly talking about it outside of the context of politics, but if you look into it, like, that's what it is. And I'm just using politics because it's super easy. I really don't care either way, just for full transparency. But that's where the cause separation and isolation, like, it really does hurt us, right? Yeah. Any other thoughts you guys have on that? Yeah.
Are you guys familiar with the Freudian theory of the shadow self?
No.
or the shadow in general. So I'm going to kind of take us back a couple episodes to the law of alignment. So I believe when the ego is positive in serving us, it's when it's aligned with who we really are, right?
Mhm.
Like our core beliefs, our core values that serve us. The shadow self, or at least the way Freud would characterize it, is when we start to identify, our ego starts to identify with that does not serve us. So think of someone who is, a bright, smart kid growing up, plays sports, does well in school, gets out of high school, goes to college, gets involved in, let's say, the party scene and starts doing drugs, starts, sleeping around with a bunch of women, and it starts going down that path. Then he starts to identify with, I'm a partier, I do drugs, I'm the fun guy. Like, these are all things that he is now imposing upon his ego, but it's not real. It's a shadow. Like, it's not his real ego. It is his shadow ego. And the shadow is always seen as a dark self, like something that does not serve you and ultimately will lead you to pain, rather than the true ego, which is supposed to help us survive. So I think that's important to take. Like, we can have an ego, but it can also not be a real ego. It can be our shadow self. It can be something that does not serve us. So kind of to tie the laws together, the law of alignment goes with the law of connection and ego very well.
Yeah. And
Sure.
oh, John, do you want to say something?
Nope, I was just agreeing.
Cool. So I think that should kind of like, if we were to define that as like our true self versus like, so if we look at ego like as a negative thing, maybe we do call it our shadow ego as being like the negative aspect of it. Then on the contrary, our good ego would be called our true self, right? Is who we actually are at our core. And that's our authentic nature, to be connected, caring, compassionate, and loving. Our true self does not fight with others because we're all connected. So fighting with others is essentially fighting with ourselves, right? And then I put an awesome little quote in there from this guy named Buddha. We are not separate, we are interdependent, right? And so how I kind of see that as is, it literally is like all the labels aside. It's like, what is actually, like, going back to Tim said, like, what is my, like, who am I? Like, so it goes back to like the law of alignment, right? It's like, who actually am I? And am I doing things because I'm a self-proclaimed meathead, or because I'm a husband, I'm a father, or is it because this is actually who I am, and like this is my calling, this is what I feel inside of me, right? And it's like it's understanding from that point of view of what I put up, like, what's my purpose, right? Go back to the always from all the way to day one, like, what's my purpose? What am I on this planet for? Like John said, here to make people feel better about themselves, like make feel they're worth it. Like, that's how I kind of see this as being, is like understanding that like all those things, and truly just knowing that we are like how I live my life directly can reflect or can influence how you guys live your life, in a positive way, right? So, John, take that over.
Yeah, so first off is with your true self. If you don't know what that true self looks like or feels like, there are a couple ways to figure it out. Number one is with belief breakthrough, which I'm sure we'll be talking about closer to the end. But also, like, just sit back for a moment and imagine your best day. It doesn't even have to be something that you actually remember, but if you envision your best day, is it based on things that happened to you, or is it based on like how you're feeling and how you're acting? I'm willing to bet that it's going to be the latter. That how you feel and how you act on just a wonderful day is more aligned with your true self. It's like, for me, when I'm aligned with my true self, like, those days they're really productive. I'm laughing a lot. I'm making my wife laugh a lot, and that is my true self. And I know, like, my true self is pretty darn awesome. It's just a matter of how often I'm actually aligned with that true self. So if you haven't ever done that, like, do that exercise. Sit back and think, what does my perfect day look like for me, and do your best to emulate that every single day.
Awesome. Tim, what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, I'm about to get real vulnerable on you guys. So lock in. So this is something that's really common in the bodybuilding, powerlifting, strength athlete world. So I'm just going to talk about me, but know that I know a lot of people in the industry, and a lot of us share the same characteristics. Growing up, I was incredibly meek, mild. I don't want to say timid, but I'm just a kind of a marshmallow, if you will, like a real, just soft, gooey core. I'm sweet on the inside. I've always been that way. So out of I would say probably self-protection. This is very common in the strength world. I got into lifting weights to get bigger. Probably more than anything to put on a veil of armor around myself. So that way, I mean, if you look at me, if people don't know me, if they just meet me on the street, I'm bald. I've got a lot of tattoos, I'm real hairy, and I'm real big and muscular. If you don't know anything about me, I look scary, I look mean, and I look like I could probably kill you, honestly. But then the moment you meet me and you get to know me, you'll be like, oh, he's just a big teddy bear. Like there's nothing to worry about there. So to go into the true self, my true self is somebody that really, my heart is really to serve people and really to help people. I'm a server by nature. But my shadow self, even the thing I really love to do, like this is more than just a day-to-day action. This is something I've consciously planned out in my life, is to be the biggest, buffest, person on the planet. Like that's literally what I'm going for. But then a few years ago, I kind of had this revelation, if you will, or realization. It was actually through counseling, really through therapy, that I've been doing all of this to build this armor around myself to protect people from actually seeing the true self. So that's kind of my vulnerable story, and that's where I'm at. But that I can actually really speak to like living a certain way, but full well knowing that my inner self is not like the person that I display to people that don't know me.
Yeah, that's actually really powerful. And I think ultimately on some level, I've gone through that same concept of like using weight training and using my body as a way to escape, of like who I actually was at the time. But through the weight training, through building the body, I've actually developed uh, who who I wanted to become, which was nice. Although my initial response was to hide,
Mm-hmm.
it's actually forced me to become the person I want to become. And I think a lot of people have gone through that same experience. I think it's really powerful. And I think that's the cool thing about fitness and your health is that like it actually has that tendency that most people like they want to lose weight, they want to get back in shape because they want to hide something. But through doing it, through that journey, the true thing you can do is you can actually find yourself. It forces you to get down and dirty and figure out these problems, because if you don't acknowledge these issues, these problems you do have, eventually like it goes away. You end up gaining the weight back in the situation, right? You're losing all the results because you don't actually attack the real problem to the situation. And so I think that's really the value of fitness is it does exactly what Tim did. Like it doesn't force you, but it creates this like, hey, I don't like myself, so I'm going to create this shell, this armor. But through finding your shell and your armor, you have the ability to actually find yourself and your purpose. Right.
In order to put armor around something, you have to at least know what you're putting it around.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so I put that in the wrong area. I was like, what's going on with that? Okay, so there's an error on here. So our true self seeks to serve and uplift others, right? Knowing that in serving others, we also serve ourselves. And so there's a couple cool quotes here. I do not do this for India. I do this for myself, by Gandhi. And when you are well, your wellness spills onto others. Thich Nhat Hanh, which is another Buddhist monk here. And so what I really see in this slide is understanding that like the more we actually take care of ourselves. So this actually goes back to one of our core beliefs of like grow and contribute, right? It's like we need to get better ourselves. We need to figure out our stuff. We need to take care of ourselves, and then through that, we're able to actually take care of others next, right? And so that's what I really see. This is like you must serve yourself, and like actually by serving other people, though, you actually do serve yourself as well. And so it goes back and forth. And from somebody like Gandhi, who's one of the most like popular, most quoted, people on the planet, I would say the fact that he said like I don't do this for India, right? When they're trying to basically reclaim their independence from Britain, but like I do it for myself, right? For someone who's proclaimed to be like one of like changes the world, like understanding like most influential people on the planet, like did it for himself, right? And so there's also something to be said about like taking care of number one. So you have the ability, you have the compassion, you have the skills to be able to share that with other people, right? So grow and contribute, which is one of our core values. So Tim, tell me about your thoughts about like serving other people.
So yeah, I completely 100% agree with you, and it kind of harkens back to like the idea of trying to pour from an empty cup, right? Like, or maybe a better analogy is when you hop on an airplane and they're going through the safety protocols and whatnot. They always tell you to put on your air mask before taking care of your children. That seems counterintuitive, but I would argue, in the sense of health, fitness, even mental health, these breakthroughs and things that we're talking about today, that if you focus on yourself and you become the best version of yourself, you have more to give. You can show up better at work as an employee. You can show up better to your spouse. You can show up better for your children. You can show up better for your friends and your coworkers. You just show up better as a human being, and you can offer more. And if we talk a little bit about kind of like last week, we talked about attention. If we're taking care of ourselves, that's no longer robbing attention from us. Now, if I'm not thinking about all my problems, if I'm not thinking about, oh, I'm tired, or, I feel gross, I feel like I'm not self-confident, I can't pay attention to your problems. I can't hear you through all of the noise that I got going on. But if I take care of that first, it frees up that bandwidth. Now, when you talk to me, I can pick up on, oh, it sounds like Logan is down a little bit today. I'm going to check in on him. I'm going to really dig in. I can give my attention to him because now I have it. I actually have some to give. But if I'm running on empty, good luck, because it's on it. Like, honestly, I'm too focused on myself. So that's kind of what it calls back to me.
It's actually really powerful. I've been, for some reason, that really just hit me right there. It's like, when you're able to take care of yourself, you actually get attention back. And with that attention, you're able to catch what other people say. You're able to catch how people act. You become more aware of your surroundings, which allows you to, in fact, notice when maybe somebody else isn't feeling good about themselves and not feeling good. But if you don't feel good about yourself, like you're so like bogged down and stressed out by the problems in your life, like you can't see anything past, 3 inches in front of your face. And I think what you said, Tim, was really powerful. And that actually made me make that connection even a lot better. So that's good. John.
Yeah, now it's my turn to get a little vulnerable here. So actually, just 2 days ago, I had a really tough conversation with my wife, and for one of the first times ever, if not the first time, she said that I was tending to be selfish. It was really upsetting her because I wasn't taking her needs into consideration, and to be clear, like, she wasn't wrong either. But I was like, okay, so something's really, really wrong here. What, like, clearly, like, my true self is not selfish. I'm 100% sure of that. So if I'm not acting as my true self, like, what's going on? And so the very first thing I did was I looked at what I can, maybe ironically, what can I do differently for myself? So that way I don't feel selfish. So I don't have to be only seeing 3 feet in front of my face, and actually be able to see what Nicole needs and what she needs specifically from me, and make sure that, like, I'm not being selfish. I can take care of other people. I do have a full cup to pour from. And I was very proud of myself, actually, to look there first, because probably a year ago, if someone had told me, like, oh, you're being selfish, and I agreed with them, I would have stopped doing everything for myself, and then the problem would have just gotten worse and worse. So point being is, like, yeah, the very first thing you got to do if you're feeling like a selfish person, it's like, look what you can do more for yourself, and you will have more capacity to give to other people.
That's freaking fire too, dude. That's really good. That's like one of those aha moments of like, huh, when I'm being selfish, I look to do more stuff for myself, right? And like that's pretty cool.
And it's working, just to be clear.
Yeah, that's really good. That's fire. Both those were like really light bulb moments for me. That's cool. Okay, let's look at projection. This is actually one of my favorite, I don't know what you call these topics, things. I'm gonna call it a thing, right? But I love this idea of a projection because once I learned about it, I see it everywhere, right? I see it obviously in myself a lot, but I'm also able to see in other people, which I think is, which allows me to come from this place of empathy, which I talked about earlier, right? So understanding the same simple concepts. So we judge others by their flaws and weaknesses that we actually see in ourselves, right? So what this really means is our true self judges neither ourselves nor others, but holds ourselves and others in unconditional love, acceptance, and compassion, which means that if we're able to do it for ourselves first, then we're able to do it for others. So there's lots of cool things in here, but obviously, like, if we're talking about just projection, like, basically, when you think the world sucks, it's because you think you suck, right? When you think the whole world's a terrible place, it's because you're terrible on the inside. And once I understood this concept, I was like, oh man, this is powerful. When I look at John, like, oh, John, like he's scrawny, he's skinny, right? All that is like my own thoughts of like, I see myself in John. I'm like, I don't like myself, right? And so I look for all the flaws in John because those are the things I like in myself. And so anytime you see people who are bashing people, specifically internet trolls or warriors, or like that's the easiest place to see it nowadays, is like it has nothing to do with you, right? Nothing. It has everything to do with themselves. And when you're able to like actually understand that, it allows you to come from this place of empathy, right? We got the 3 things. We can like get back on the keyboard and we can start like mashing back at them, like, no, you suck, no, you suck, no, you suck, right? Which always always ends with everyone being really happy. Like everyone loves when people call each other names, right? Like I love when people call me names. I love when I call people names. Like everybody wins, right? No, wrong. Or you just do nothing, right? Which honestly, in some cases might be the best option, or you can practice empathy, right? You're just like, hey, like, I totally get it. I understand where you're coming from. Thanks. Appreciate your feedback. Keep crushing it, dude, right? Or whatever it may be, right? So those are like the three options. But when you understand that it's nothing to do with you, like when someone makes a post about you, or they talk about you, you hear them talk about behind your back, like they're not talking about you. They're just talking about themselves. And like that to me is like really powerful. And just to add another piece of that, like the more I realize that, like I care more about what I think about myself than what I care about what other people think of me. Right. And when I actually like truly understood that was the way to live life, I quit worrying about what other people thought of me, because I realized that like they didn't know me. They didn't know my situation. And like I know my situation, I know me. So as long as I'm in alignment and I'm congruent with what I'm doing, what I'm saying, you know what? I'm happy. And that's the person that I need to make happy is myself. Not John, not Tim, not some stranger on the internet. And I think that for me became really helpful in not only being acceptant for myself, but also makes me really easy to be accepting of other people as well. So, John, you want to follow that up?
Yeah. So a couple of things. I like that you said that, the one person you need to make happy is yourself. And the simple reason for that is because you have no control over how happy somebody else is. That's ultimately up to them. Like the only thing you have control over is your state, how you react to things, how you perceive yourself. And if you need to take action to change your perception of yourself, well, then do it. Right. Like if you like, for example, for me, my inspiration or my original motivation for working out was being scrawny. Like, I don't want to be a scrawny guy. Like, my true self isn't scrawny, is what I would say. I actually said that back in the day too, before I even talked about any of this stuff. So I worked on it. Now the difference there is between then and now is that at that time, if I would see like a really buff guy in the gym, or a guy who looked like how I wanted to look, I would immediately like just try to pick apart his physique.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, he looks really good, but like his calves are small, or he's clearly ignored his rear delts, like whatever. And it was never true, but it always made me feel better, at least on the outside. Like, okay, I might be scrawny, but he's got issues too. And now whenever I see somebody who's got an amazing physique, like it's hard for me not to go up to them and be like, hey, like, how long have you been working out? Like, what do you do? Like, maybe I can learn something from this person, because I know that like picking them apart is not going to do me any good. And if he was sitting there like worrying about how I look, that would just be ridiculous. So why do I need to care about how somebody else looks? And so it's been a fun shift to see like how my perception of myself and others has changed in the gym all the time. It's pretty cool.
Fire. Love that. Tim?
So first response is, John, are you sure you're not a bodybuilder?
I mean, I'm building my body, Tim.
That's what we all do. That's what we all do.
Yeah.
Come on. But either way, I think projection is, boy, this one's kind of tricky. I mean, conceptually, it makes perfect sense, but in the moment, I mean, how many times have you guys went through an experience and came out the other side and been like, huh, that was all me. Like been self-aware of your projection. And I know I'm guilty of this wholeheartedly, over and over and over again. Insecurities, anything that we're talking about, kind of our shadow self, like those self-limiting beliefs, they really tend to crop up in projection. And I think the best analogy, and this has happened to me, it's also happened to many people that I know, is if you're in a relationship where maybe the person isn't faithful, like maybe they're cheating on you. 9 times out of 10, from what I've seen and experienced, the person that's unfaithful automatically gets accusatory of the other person for being unfaithful. They start checking their phone. They start going through their mail. They start looking at their emails. They start going through everything, and they're just like trying to find evidence that this other person's cheating when they're the one that's actually doing it. And they're very accusatory with their tone. They're like, why are you 5 minutes late from work? Like all of these things, when really it's just a manifestation of their own insecurity or their own incongruency with their true self. So I think to attack or to work on projection is exactly like what John said. Like if you have something wrong with you, fix it. Like take action, do something. If you're unhappy with the way you look and the way you feel, no one else can change that. That's you. That's you. You've got to be the first one to take the first step. You've got to commit. You're the one that's got to go through all of the work to get that change. Don't blame other people. Again, don't be a victim. Be the hero of your own story.
Yeah. And I'll piggyback that by saying that I think most people don't understand this concept of projection. And so the benefit of projection is that it's a fantastic mirror. If you're like, man, what do I need to work on? You just need to look at what you say about other people, and that's what you need to work on, right? Because those are actually your flaws that you probably don't see. They're unconscious. And those are the things that you can bring to the surface that allow you to be like, oh, here's what I need to work on, right? It's a fantastic mirror. And so if anybody's listening, they're like, they've never heard this concept of projection. They're like, obviously we talk about the negative aspect, but here's the positive aspect of it is that it literally can tell you exactly what you need to work on in order for you to become a good person, not a good person, become a better person and continue to grow yourself. Right. That's actually how I use it. Anytime I start to see myself like doing this, I'm like, oh, this person's selfish. I'm like, oh shoot. Like, and I start to dig deep, like, where am I selfish at? I start to find like, oh, there it is. Right. So that's one I see as one of the benefits of projection is that it literally can give you the path on which you need to work on for yourself. All right, so let's talk about the belief breakthrough and the law of connection. So the belief breakthroughs allow us to really connect to our true self, right? Underneath all the layers of our limiting beliefs, kind of what Tim was talking about. Underneath all the junk limiting beliefs is a divine, limitless, and a pure being, right? And so as we learn who our true selves are, we also learn to see others in greatness, right? Beneath all of their protective layers as well. We become less judgmental and more compassionate, and then we're able to work better and more effectively with people to achieve our goals. And I think that as I live every day more and more, right, as I start to get smarter and wiser, I realize that in order for me to actually get what I want in life, the more I can help other people get what they want, is truly the path, right? And the only way to understand that is by, number one, you must understand yourself. And so understanding why I think the way I do, why I speak the way I speak, why I do things I do is number one. So this is where we talk about the growth aspect. But the next piece is the contribution or seeing greatness in others and being able to see it from someone else's point of view. Like, how do I see this from John's point of view? How do I see this from Tim's point of view? And then truly being able to see greatness in everybody in situations where most people, they get mad or combative. Like, how do you see greatness in that person? How do you see the best in them? How do you practice empathy, right? And so what the belief breakthrough does is allows you to, number first, allows you to connect to who you truly are, right? Like getting rid of all these beliefs that don't serve you, allowing you to truly like have the attention, as Tim was talking about, to be able to like be at peace with who you are. And with that, it allows you to have the vision to see the greatness in others. So that's my version of what the belief breakthrough does in order for you to get to that core root of law of connection. So, Tim.
So I 100% agree with everything you said, and I think that you said it really well. But I kind of have a follow-up question for you.
Mm-hmm.
How have you seen this affect the way that you've been a father?
In what aspects?
So I'm sure all of us have different experiences with our fathers. But I can imagine, I'm not a dad, so I don't have intimate knowledge on the dad side. I just have intimate knowledge on the child side. When like with projection and like getting through all of these protective layers, like letting that affect the way that you raise your kid. Because sometimes, a lot of times, empathy and serving people isn't necessarily giving them what they want. It's giving them what they need. So when you're disciplining your children or when you're correcting their behavior, I just kind of want to know, like behind the veil, like how has this process affected the way that you discipline / correct the behavior of your children? Like, have you seen an impact there?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I think that the beauty of my situation is I actually have an 11-year-old and I have now a 2-year-old. And so how they get parented are obviously two different ways at this moment. But the 11-year-old is, I've learned more about projection from her than anybody else. Like, number one. And so like I don't know if it's again fate or ironic that you brought it up, but the flaws I see in her are all the flaws that I see that I see in myself, and especially at her age, right? And like all the things that I get mad at her for, like those are just things that I either that was me, or there still is a trace of that inside of me that I haven't addressed. And so from that point of view, yeah, like that's where like she's the one who like helps me the most in full transparency. Because I really know what I need to work on by how I view her and how I treat her. I'm like, man, why do I do that? And all of a sudden I'm able to like do a breakthrough to get to the root of it. I'm like, oh, it's because of when I was her age, I did this, right? And it's like, and then because of that, I feel like I'm a selfish person, right? And so it allowed me to basically be the mirror that I was talking about, to be able to help me understand what my true limitations were. Right. So that's like one piece that most people might not have that opportunity. But the second piece is like, I think what you're actually done with like our youngest, like how we're actually rearing her from the start, is to like just continue to like make sure that we don't put our limiting beliefs on her. And like again, it starts with you, like making sure that you're taking care of yourself first, right? But then we're really active about saying like, hey, you're beautiful, you're strong. We don't talk about like we don't say, hey, stop crying. We say, hey, be happy. Right. So like we talk about what we want her to do, not what we don't want her to do. Right. And I think by doing that, we don't want to put limiting beliefs on her. Right. It's like, hey, like you're not hurt. You're happy. You're strong. You're beautiful. Like you get up. Right. Right. Okay. Come on. Right. So it's really having that uplifting energy and being really conscious of not putting limiting beliefs on your kids is something that we're super aware of, and it's like our language is super important, especially as kids are growing up. Like they literally learn everything from their parents.
Yeah, and have you seen like a big change, like from when like Kobe was 2 years old, and like how you parented her versus the 2-year-old now? Like, have you the growth in you has translated it over to being
1,000
a better
times.
parent?
Yeah, and Katie would be a better person to talk to on that, because I didn't come into Kobe's life until she was 4. But even from Kobe was 4 till now she's 11. Like her growth as a human being is like astronomical, right? But like to answer your question is like, yes, like having those expectations and like telling. I guess what was your original question? I guess
So
in
I
answering
kind
your
of
original
know,
question.
like from the parent side, like the changes that you have went through
Yes,
and
yes,
how it
yes,
has
yes.
affected the different parenting styles. So like before being self-aware of all this projection and
Correct.
insecurities and self-limiting beliefs, how did you parent then versus now?
Yes.
You answered how you parent now, but like that growth in you directly correlated towards like ultimately it's gonna translate to being a better parent, right?
Yeah. So okay. So with Kobe's actually great, because what we had to do is what we have to do with most clients, we have to break beliefs, right? Because they already have these bad beliefs, we have to break them, right? With our youngest lady, she's not going to have, and this is obviously our goal, to have no limiting beliefs, right? You only have positive beliefs, you have to break them. So that would be the concept.
Okay. I just find that really cool. Like this is a real world example of how, fitness and like the stuff that we're talking about now, like this have not an impact just on you, but on your children. And imagine like they grew up that way. So then they just do what their parents have done. So then when they have kids, it just literally passes the domino down in a positive. It's a momentum building cycle.
Yeah. 100%. And to piggyback what you said is like, so any parents are listening, like all the bad habits you have, your kids are gonna get them. So it's like the old adage of like the parents like who says like, don't smoke, don't drink, and they go out and they smoke and they drink. Like the kid's gonna smoke and drink, you know, right? And so like if you actually want to serve your kids, you want to serve the people that you're closest to. Like you must serve yourself first, and you must show up, and you must act and lead from the front, because ultimately like kids literally they just mimic their parents to a T.
That's super cool.
John, you want to piggyback on that?
Well, I'm not a dad either, but I've done a lot of thinking really for all of my life actually. Like, okay, like here's how I want to be a parent. And I was thinking about this even when I was really young. I always knew that like I want to be a dad. I'm gonna be a good dad. About a year ago, I was thinking like, okay, I struggle with this, and this, and I'm gonna make sure that my kids don't struggle with this or they don't struggle with that. And that's kind of cool. It's kind of nice, but if I don't take care of it, if I don't fix what I struggle with and understand how to, then how in the world am I going to prevent them from falling into the same exact things? So this ordeal, we'll say, with belief breakthrough and going through it and really analyzing my true self is giving me confidence that when I am a dad, which won't be too long from now, most likely, like I can give my kids these positive beliefs and rather than saying like, okay, like don't procrastinate, don't just assume that you're super smart. Like, hey, you're super smart. Work harder. Or you don't have to, it's not about not procrastinating. It's about like, hey, just get stuff done. It feels good. Get stuff done. And I know that if I stop doing belief breakthroughs, then by the time where I am at a point where I can give that genuine type of advice, that I'm going to give the wrong advice. I'm going to give the negative, hey, don't do this, don't do that. And of course, that's exactly what we're going to do.
And I'll say this for you guys, for everybody who doesn't have kids either. Like before I had kids, like I knew what I wanted to do. Just like how you guys had like visions of how you're gonna be as a dad. Like I saw myself that as well. And when I had this awesome opportunity to basically inherit a child at 4, basically, right away, like yes, Katie from day one, I treated her just like she was my daughter. I didn't never try to win her with like being like the like Disneyland dad. I never tried to buy her anything. Like I commanded respect, just like I would expect my my actual kid to respect me. Like I commanded that from the beginning. And while that created some animosity in the beginning, it has now served us to a place where we do have this mutual respect. And obviously with the youngest, it just solidifies it, right? But like before I even had a kid, like when I was coaching clients, this is the benefit that you guys have, and anybody else who maybe is like a manager is able to, be somebody who helps people or coaches people. Like these are your kids, right? Like how you coach your clients is literally how you will coach your kids, and that's how I've always viewed it. And so like I've always been a good coach in that aspect. And so I knew that when I had a kid, that I was going to coach them very similar, right? Um, so anyway, that's more for you guys to know that like how you coach your clients right now is like actually a really good representation of how you will um, how you coach your kids, right? So all right, so let's talk about action steps. How do we apply this, right? It's all about application. So this is actually fun, right? And this is called an unconditional love game. And you probably heard this before, maybe you read it in a book or two, but this unconditional love game is basically pick somebody, usually a spouse is a great person to do it. It could be a kid, it could be somebody you're close to, it could be a friend. But ask this person what you can do to show him or her love, okay? Do what he or she asks, no matter what, no matter if they piss you off, no matter if they upset you, no matter if they don't do the dishes, they do one of your, they violate one of your preferences, right? It doesn't matter, you still do it, okay? Then have no expectation of return. So like just because you say I love you doesn't mean that they got to say it back, right? And then check back at the end of the day or week for feedback. And the reason why I said day or week because like you know this game is done over a day, right? But how I actually use this in my life right now is we do it every week because it's something that I plan on doing forever. Because like this is not just a game to me. This is real life, and I actually play this game every single day with my wife. And we actually do this every single week. We do it and we update it. We ask what we want, we need to show love, and it gets done, regardless if they piss me off, or excuse me, if she pisses me off, or whether she wants to do it or not. Like wanting is not like me not wanting to do it is not an option. I just do it, right? And with that being said, like this is one of the most game-changing things you can do. And again, most people think about it in like a 30-day sprint, but I challenge you actually to think about this, how you can do this forever. And so what I've seen has worked for us. My relationship is like doing this weekly and updating it weekly, rather than just saying it once, doing it for 30 days and then forgetting about it and like, cool, you were in love for 30 days, good job. Um, I just, I'm a big believer. If it's really that important, then figure out how to do it every freaking day. Like, should you just love your wife, for 30 days and then go back to your old habit? And number two is like, or do you think that loving your wife every other day is like, is that cool? Or once a week on date night, you really think that's enough? And so that's where I'll challenge you to figure out how to do this every single day. And how I've seen it be successful in my life is update these weekly. Like, what do I need from you this week, right? And it might change next week. So anyway, um, Tim, any feedback on the unconditional love game?
So two main thoughts come to my head. First is a book that I read, and I also encourage anybody in a serious relationship or someone that's married to read this book. It's called The 5 Love Languages. I don't know if you guys have read that one or not, but essentially we all have certain languages, like what speaks to us and what makes us feel loved, what makes us feel loved, makes us filled up, essentially. And essentially what we naturally do is we like to show love in the way that we like to feel loved. So me and my partner, so my love language inherently is words of affirmation. And I don't know if you guys know all the ones, all the 5, but words of affirmation essentially just like words that build you up. Those really make me feel good. So I naturally give a lot of words of affirmation naturally. However, Angie, her love language is acts of service. So making sure the dishes are done, making sure everything's vacuumed, the laundry is folded, like those things, especially like because we both work a lot of hours, mean a lot to her, way more than a note would ever mean to her. So we sat down when we first started dating, and we talked about this right off the bat, like, hey, what is your language? What's my language? And occasionally we'll check in, at least once a month, we'll check in like, hey, how am I doing? And sometimes the feedback's not good. So you got to take that feedback as it is, not as criticism. As just like, yeah, like out of 10, you're probably giving me a 6 right now. Okay. And then you go back to the drawing board and you try to meet them where they're at. So kind of the analogy I always use is like, if you speak Mandarin Chinese and I speak English and I keep coming at you in English, even though I'm trying to tell you I love you, you're not understanding a word I'm saying. All it sounds like is I'm cursing at you.
Yeah.
Same if you talking to me in Mandarin, I have no idea what you're saying. So you got to learn their language. You got to meet them on their level. And that kind of brings me to the second thought that I was thinking. And I love this analogy. It's by Alex Hermosi. He always says that him and Layla's his wife, and they're very, very awesome couple. They're on a month-to-month contract because people inherently do what's in their best interest at all times. And so they actually have formalized meetings once a week to check in with each other on how they're doing on these different aspects of the relationship. And I know that sounds very formal. It sounds very robotic, but in their schedule and it works. They're intentional about every single thing that they do, including their relationship, because he wants to make it in her best interest every single month to stay with him and vice versa. And I love that analogy because ultimately, if we think that way, we will always show up and we will always pursue our partner in the way that they need to be pursued because we want them to stay with us.
Yeah, and like I literally stole that from Alex, and like that's what we do. We do those weekly meetings, and Katie posts about it sometimes. We've been doing it for over 2 years. I'm telling you, they're the most game-changing things you can ever do. They like people don't like the idea of like making it formalized and treating it like a business or whatever, but like all that stuff is like limiting beliefs. It's all garbage because it's literally the best opportunity for you to tell the person who you love, you're spending the rest of your life with, what you need that day, right? Because what you need that day might be different than what you need the next day, right? Or next week or next month, right? And so like, just do it. That's what I gotta say. All right, John, go for it.
Really the same thing. So Nicole and I do those weekly meetings as well, relatively new to them. But they've already been amazing. And Nicole's, well, my initial reaction to it was like, yeah, marriage isn't a business. And then when I got over that limiting belief and suggested to Nicole that we do it, she's like, oh, yeah, I just we don't like marriage isn't a business. We don't want to treat it that way. Like it's too formal. And all I had to say to her to get her to agree to do them was like, you really think if we're asking each other these questions that we're gonna get formal answers? Like these are very emotional questions, and just because the process itself is formal, that does not mean that the result of it is an unromantic or an unloving thing. It has no choice but to be this emotional experience. And yeah, you can take it as as positively or negatively emotional as you want, or as logically as you want. But at the end of the day, it's going to be exactly as emotional as it needs to be for you to improve your relationship and make sure that you both want to be with each other every single month, every single year, ideally every day.
Mm-hmm. And if I know two things, we vote with our dollars and we vote with our time. And so if you are setting aside time every single week, what you are saying without saying it is, I am voting on you. I'm voting on us. I'm actually invested in this relationship. I'm intentional about setting aside time for us every single week. And I would say that with the meetings and also, formalized date night. What's wrong with that? That is something say like, look, I'm setting aside, we're both intentionally setting aside this amount of time to connect. And when you're a busy person with a lot of aspirations, if you don't have a schedule or if you don't have an intentional block of time set aside, it gets eaten up real fast. Something is always, you always have something to do.
Or my sexy time too. Put it in your calendar.
Exactly.
I think so. Like, how to smash a limiting belief is like think about all the things that you like in life. Like, let's talk about maybe movies or sports. Like, people like those things. They feel they get good emotions from them. But you actually look at them from like the other side of it. Understand that like let's talk about football. Like football actually is like very system oriented. You have quarters. You have certain rules that you got to follow. Right, with all these systems that are in place, then once you have the system in place, then all of a sudden that's where you get your variety, you get your emotion, right? And a marriage meeting itself, like at the surface of it, okay, it's formalized, but that's it. The questions inside there, that's where you get your variety. That's where you get your excitement from like answering those questions and you be able to get the feedback, right? Movies, same thing. Like movies are all an hour and a half long, right? You know exactly how it is from the start from the beginning, right? There's always a backstory. There's the wall, there's the epiphany, there's the plan, the conflict, the achievement, the transformation. Like they're all the freaking same, right? It's ultimately if you just understand that it doesn't matter if it's planned or scripted, but the best things in life that we actually enjoy are all planned and scripted. That's it, right? So if you need that to break your limiting belief, then there it is, right?
Love it.
All right, guys. Hey, appreciate you guys. This was a fun one for sure. So law of connection. If you guys have any other final words to say?
Nope.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, I appreciate you guys. Thank you guys so much for bringing your big egos on this call today. And we'll be back next week with another law. But until then, happy Thursday, and hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll chat with you guys soon. Bye.
Yeah.